Hello, everybody. Um, we have a very small group with us today, and I don't know that there's anybody in this group of 15 or so that is going to talk in defense of SB 954. And I don't like to have a discussion with the task force when they're not opposing viewpoints. But we're here, everybody's here, and maybe there are some suggestions or some clarifications, um, that maybe something will come out of this, but it's a real catfight going on in Tallahassee, right now. But now the good news, the information that I had that was incorrect the last meeting about 23 and 24. The numbers are complete, or I am told by our medical examiner, and we've decreased a whopping 44% in overdose death in 2024 over 2023. We won't see the state medical examiner's report until next Christmas or after next New Year's. But we do have our own local, and you can see in front of you the numbers going from 439 to 244 are phenomenal. And whatever, I mean, there are many reasons, and people will study, and probably one of the reasons is from a cynical standpoint that drug dealers have been killing their customers. So maybe there's been some change in that regard in terms of the use of fentanyl or fentanyl analogs. But anybody want to comment on these numbers at all? Okey doke, let's go on to the amendment I was working, so I couldn't tune in to the hearing, but apparently there was a lot of fireworks going on. And Democrats were the strongest opponents of SB 954. So anyway, there was an amendment that was placed in today. And I don't know if anybody on the call understands or knows what this amendment does, why it was put in there. I was hoping we would have somebody here to explain that, but apparently we do not. But anyway, 15A, you see it up on your screen. Let me have control of it. Okay. They're adding certified recovery resident that does not occupy a community or structure that is governed by a condominium association under Chapter 718, or which fully occupies a community or structure that is governed by a condominium association under 718, is deemed, I believe it's going to say is deemed a, well, hang on. Is deemed a non-transient residential use for purposes of all local zoning ordinances. What we would have preferred, meaning through, well, we've always said this, to put in the transients cannot alone be sufficient to reject an application for a sober home, recovery residence or other community residence, used as its own, just like Matt on its own is not enough to reject somebody from being able to be a resident. You have to have something more than just transient. We suggested that as an amendment. They're only saying condominium associations. Nowhere in here does it say HOA, homeowners associations. Anyway, this is not the this is not the real problem with the bill. I mean, it is a problem, but does anyone want to comment on 15A in the amendment?
I just want to point out that, yes, if their intent is to exclude homeowners associations, that would be under Chapter 720, so it doesn't do it.
Okay, I've been told that it is supposed to include homeowners associations, or at least C is supposed to include homeowners associations, but well, it obviously does not. Dan,
I think this probably originates from a total misunderstanding of the Fair Housing Act. The act already, a lot of condominium associations, as well as homeowner associations, have provisions in their bylaws or there are covenants prohibiting businesses, and they have tried in vain to treat community residences for people with disabilities as businesses. And I think they're putting this in because this is pure speculation, but I'm betting that the proponent of this bill intends on occupying a lot of condominiums in a building with a recovery community. That's the only reason I could think of they would put this in, and it's frankly totally unnecessary. But that's my speculation.
well, if it's not necessary, then it's not harmful, right?
It's I wouldn't spend time fighting this one. The underlying bill is much more damaging and of concern.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on 15A? Okay, let's go on to 15B. So it'll be the main statute, if you would, 954. You have to change. We have a different configuration today. My intercom is 15 feet away from me.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
954, please.
Oh, you got it.
Thank you.
Sorry.
While we're getting this up, I have a question. And I already know the answer from FAR, but Michael, I didn't call you, I didn't ask you. I presume that Oxford House does not keep a running tab on occupancy. Would that be fair? Is that correct?
We do keep a, what do you mean?
Like on any given day, do you know, like statewide, you have 2,200 beds or so and climbing. On any given day, do you know how many of those beds are vacant?
It's updated once a week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If you know, what is the approximate vacancy percentage right now? This week?
It's generally holding around 80% of occupied, so 20%.
So you got 20%?
Yeah.
Okay. What and do you use it? Do you have a certain software application that gives you the ability once a week to do this?
When?
Yeah, well, you use the vacancy website, which is updated via each house individually. And so they send in basically just a text message to the website and updates automatically.
Okay. All right. That might be something that FAR can look into, that the way you guys do it, because they right now they don't have any calculation or base or database or manner in which they can determine occupancy. So I don't know, Michael, I think you were on this meeting.
I am, and actually I made a note of that to have a look at it, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I can definitely get you in touch with the architect that did that for us.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And like I said, Al, we're upgrading to a new platform, which I've inquired of whether it would do that for us as well, but this is good to know.
Okay, thank you. Well, now let's look at B, lines 43 through 51. And I'm just going to open it up for comments as to what this does.
To allow a structure originally constructed and permitted for multifamily purposes.
Kelly, are you talking to us, or do you need
Oh, I was just reading it. I'm sorry. I thought it was. I thought
okay,
it was
no,
on
you can read away, just silently,
so
please.
apologize. I'm going to mute myself. I apologize. I was reading it to try to understand this.
Okay,
This is so important. So thank you.
okay. So does anybody want to explain what this means? Other than Dan right now, is there anybody else who wants to chime in? Because Dan, I want to save you for last. And I wish I had somebody else that I could put in here that could argue for this. But I do want to understand. Okay, Dan, you're up.
What this section essentially does, aside from generating a lot of lawsuits, I suspect, is allow certified recovery residences, not just in all districts zoned multifamily, which is not defined, by the way, in the legislation, but also in any multifamily building that was built originally as multifamily, which will include, I would imagine, duplexes and triplexes in single family neighborhoods, to be used as a certified recovery residence. But then it throws in this absolutely unjustifiable and I think illegal provision, limiting it to 2 residents per bedroom. That is not a subject for zoning, as the Supreme Court made very clear in its Edmonds decision. They should be allowed under the same formula to prevent overcrowding that applies to all residential districts, which is generally 70 feet for the first person in a bedroom and 50 feet for each additional person, or 50 feet for each person if you have more than one. So if you had a 150-foot square bedroom, you could have 3 people. Zoning doesn't cover that. That's a building code issue. But the bottom line is this is just going to allow anyone who wishes, for example, to establish a recovery community with 100 people to buy up or rent out houses, duplexes in single family districts, and in multifamily districts, rent out a whole block if they wish, or buy a whole block and establish a recovery community. I don't know that this exactly falls in line with the best practices for recovery. It certainly assures that the people in the homes are going to be interacting only with other people in recovery and not with people not in recovery, losing the opportunity of role models, which is one of the underlying reasons for the whole reason why, one of the reasons why these homes need to be in residential neighborhoods when they're emulating a family and they are not clustering together, which we know can cause some problems, aside from the fact we don't know what the effect would be on property values if you put a bunch together. But it basically would eviscerate the zoning ordinances of all the cities in Florida that are trying to prevent clusters and concentrations from developing, and certainly goes against all the research that we've done. It's basically, this bill is purely arbitrary and capricious, and that could get it thrown out in court if it ever got challenged.
Let me ask you this: when you refer to all districts zoned multifamily residential, does that include duplexes?
That's the $24,000 question. The bill does not define what multifamily means. I think they would try to go to dictionaries, but the plain meaning would be something that's more than one dwelling unit in a building.
Okay, I see Terrell's got her hand up, and I think she probably can answer that question. But before I turn it over to you, Terrell, as I read this, and we're going to talk about section C, but as I read this, when we talk about level 1, 2, or 3, FAR certified recovery residents. Okay, so anybody who owns a program that is FAR certified in the first 3 levels would be able to, because there's no restriction in B, would be able to open up another residence anywhere and everywhere, as long as it was in a let's see, as long as it was in constructed or permitted for multifamily purposes. Would that, I mean, is that your read, Dan, of this? That basically there is no more zoning when it comes to level 1, 2, and 3. There is no input from the municipalities or the counties. And that you buy or you rent a home, you already have a program as of whatever the date was, July 1st of this year. And you could pick your city. You go to Sarasota, go to Jacksonville, go to Lakeland, and just rent a house and open up, as long as it becomes certified, open up a house.
Well, it's not a matter of them. If I recall certification, it's the operator that's certified.
Right. That's why I'm
Not the
saying
individual
the
home.
program would be the operator.
Yeah,
But it has to be a program that already has an existing certification.
yeah,
Because that's the last part of the Bill D says that only people who have a certified program as of July 1st.
right. I can see a successful lawsuit on that.
Discriminating against future
Yeah.
recovery residences.
Yeah.
Okay. Terrell?
Yeah, the way I read this could apply to levels 1 through 4, certified recovery residences, and it's in all district zone multifamily residential, but then it further on kind of contradicts itself by suggesting that it's essentially any certified recovery residence kind of provided that it's for multifamily purposes, no matter where it's located. So as Dan pointed out, it could be in single family zoning districts or not. It could be duplexes. It could be foreseeably townhomes, depending on how they're labeled by the city. It could be apartments. It could be condos. I guess with this amendment, it can't be condos under a condo association, but everything else seems to be fair game. I mean, the cities are calling it vacation rentals for recovery residences, in that it looks like it will totally undermine all local zoning. But aside from that, the way this reads, I mean, it says, without a special exception, land use change, conditional use approval or variance. In just section B, it's basically saying allow a structure originally constructed and permitted for multifamily purposes. It almost reads as if I have to take an old dilapidated structure, and if somebody wants to use it as a recovery residence, they may not have to comply with local building codes. They don't have to necessarily provide for sewer and water. Maybe they're on well water, maybe they're on septic. They don't even have to look at infrastructure requirements, make sure there's adequate parking or even adequate ingress and egress as normally would be looked at in such a situation. So it creates safety issues there, as well as the fact that it does allow for, the bill allows for clustering, which I think could create other safety issues where you end up drawing in, unfortunately, an element of undesirables to the area. And I don't mean the people living in the homes. I mean people that will prey on people living in the homes, people that are going to prey on the fact that you have a vulnerable population congregated in a very concentrated area. And so it just lends itself to all kinds of issues. It's very concerning on a lot of levels.
Okay, now my question about multifamily districts, zone multifamily residential, does that include duplexes in your experience?
Yes, in my opinion and experience, yes.
Okay, because I have been told that duplexes are not district zone multifamily, that those are triplexes and above.
I think it's going to depend on the city that you're looking at, but down here in South Florida, certainly.
Certainly a duplex is included.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Okay, anybody else want to chime in? I did want to bring up one issue. I work for the state attorney. We got involved in this space to begin with because of the bad actors and the lawlessness that was happening 10 years ago. The patient brokering and the insurance fraud. Now we've gone miles in reducing the kind of bad actors that were at least in South Florida, if not the rest of the state. We've worked every year to try to make the process better and better for people who are suffer with substance use disorder. And as law enforcement, as an assistant state attorney, what I see here, and please, anybody chime in if you think I'm not correct. But if you take, a lot of these condominiums and hotels that are converted, they have an entrance and an egress, maybe two, maybe three, maybe one, well, more than one, but they usually have a guard. They usually have a fence. The comings and goings are at least monitored. Um, and it's also centrally located in one place. If you take 15 duplexes in a multifamily district out of 25, say, in the community, and they're all converted to recovery residences. And say there's 8 to 10 people in each. So say you have 100 to 150 people who are in level 4. My big concern, I don't know that there'll be a lot of clustering in the other levels, but I think that the clustering will be on the level 4, because that's the day or night. That's the model here. You have to house people in intensive forms of outpatient treatment. So roughly you take 125 or 150 people who are in level 4. Now, what does level 4 mean? Level 4 means that you either just got out of detox in most cases, or you've had a dirty test and your care has been increased. Your level of care has been increased. And again, anybody correct me if I'm way out of line here. What that says to me, as a prosecutor, is the bad actors are no longer going to be the people in the houses, because FAR is going to take care of that. I'm not worried about the quality or the purported quality. I mean, there are rogues, but of the oversight of FAR within the house, the rules, the dedication to recovery capital that happens in a FAR certified home. What worries me is at the end of the block, who's going to be there? Who's going to be waiting at the end of the block for people who are triggered in an instant because their sobriety, especially opioid, which is a years-long process of recovery, that somebody who's that recent to use, the trigger of having drug dealers a block or two away, or even in the community, I think it's a danger. I think it's a danger to the vulnerable people who are in level 4, and I welcome anybody who wants to argue against that. But one of my primary concerns is the actual residents, and the fact that people go where the action is. I mean, the drug dealers are going to go where the market is. They wouldn't do that in the middle of a community where there's one recovery residence, or if it's separated by 660 feet. That's not a bang for the buck doing that. But you have 100, 150, 200 people living within a 2-block area. That's one of my fears. Anybody want to comment on that, Terrell? I see your hand up.
Thank you. I forgot to mention earlier, one thing that this also doesn't take into account is length of stay. As you pointed out, I mean, level 4, the length of stay is usually, I'm going to say, less than 60 days even. So you're going to have a frequent turnover of property and possibly older structures where the infrastructure can't accommodate it, and cities and counties are just supposed to accept it. That creates problems, not only for the residents of the home, but also residents surrounding the home in the community. Additionally, local government regulations serve as a backstop to help ensure that these homes, or more specifically the operators that operate them, are FAR certified, and that they stay FAR certified. I could see a possibility where you may unfortunately have a situation where maybe the house starts out as FAR certified and ultimately the operator loses the certification and somebody else comes in. Who's going to be checking this? So now you're going to have a situation with much more clustering, much more frequent turnover, and absolutely no local oversight or possibility of oversight. Again, I think, FAR is wonderful, but they can only go so far. And I think that a lot of local governments have helped to form a partnership with FAR by requiring the FAR certification through local ordinances. in order to help ensure the safety and best practices are followed for the protection of the residents of the home as well as surrounding in the community surrounding them. So I just wanted to point those things out. It's very concerning, as you're very well aware, Al, and many of you on this call. I mean, other states have emulated what we have done here in Florida, and I just feel like this is taking us back 10 years. And it's possible that other states may then move forward with similar regulations here as well. And ultimately, we could end up, again, just backsliding when we've made so much progress. And you just pointed out the numbers from the from the medical examiner's office. I mean, look at the reduction in deaths. I mean, this has made positive forward progress in protecting people in the homes and in the community and making sure that they get better and that they don't become a statistic. And I'm very concerned with this legislation that it's going in the wrong direction.
Okay, thanks, Terrell. Susan, you had your hand up?
Yes, sir. What she said, and I can reiterate that the safety concern is really a concern of mine for exactly the reasons that you articulated. And Dan is correct. I mean, the purpose of a recovery residence is to be part of the community, which isn't all people necessarily in recovery. And, I don't know what the recurrence rate is for treatment providers, licensed treatment providers. I'm not sure that that's information that they are willingly ready to give out, but notwithstanding that, I think it's pretty high. So one of the things that, a good FAR certified recovery residence offers is that kind of safety, that you're in your own little bubble, but you're also part of the community because it is supposed to be a transition. And I can't remember the name of the case, but I'm pretty sure you guys prosecuted him. The guy who was took over this condo association and was storing the urine in one of the rooms, like the patio or something. This is some amount of years ago. And I don't want to guess his name because if I'm wrong, it would be not good. But he definitely took over the condominiums and the association. And I mean, it ended up being closed by you all because of the chaos that was ensuing there. And there were people that were not part of the recovery residence sort of treatment center kind of thing. And I know they sued to try to say, hey, I'm here too, and I have rights also. So that's, this I think creates more of the risk of not in my backyard rather than embracing people who are, attempting to be in long-term recovery. And what Terrell said. Okay, I'll stop now.
Thanks, Susan. I'm going to push back a little bit on the taking us back into the last decade. There are issues, but I don't think we'll ever go back to that. And I do believe that they're pretty. There's no reason to believe that FAR is not going to be able to identify a house that needs to be revoked or suspended. And once that happens, by this law, if there's an expiration date to your qualification, once you're revoked, I don't know that you can ever come back. But either way, there are unforeseen circumstances here, but this bill was never vetted by anyone that I know of. It just kind of spilled out onto the page. If it had been vetted, B would not be in existence, because the whole the talking points behind the bill are it's only level 4. We're only talking about level 4, where B is talking about levels 1, 2, and 3. C is talking about 4, and we'll get to that in a minute. And Terrell, you made some great points with regard to public safety in terms of you have no control over water, sewer. you know, can this be read that you cannot go in with a safety issue if you see that the roof is caving in? You know, I mean, again, Terrell, go ahead. You have your hand raised.
So, I mean, if the roof is caving in, we can try, but again, if somebody, basically, it would just be a normal code enforcement process. So all we would be able to do is say, fix your roof. But going to the point that you just made, Al, that FAR would be capable of determining, you know, obviously if somebody wasn't in compliance or failed to renew, that's true. But by having kind of this local government partnership, that's what helps to say, okay, your operator's no longer certified. Now you have to take the next steps. So now let's say that FAR does that, but the local government really can't act on that. What are we waiting for? DCF to come in and say, oh, okay, now let's take the next steps. Is DCF equipped to do that? I don't think so.
Okay, true. So let me go one step further in the opposite direction. If the argument is that it's discrimination to not allow people to place wherever they want to place because people in recovery are disabled, then why is it limited to just multifamily districts? I mean, the argument, wouldn't it make sense that, okay, if we're violating federal law by the, there's room for improvement, which is why we're trying to do this 419 rewrite. But I mean, doesn't the argument work for Jupiter Farms? Doesn't it work for Palm Beach? That if somebody wants to open up, they have a right under the Fair Housing Act to do that. If you're saying that the Fair Housing Act requires that they be able to locate in multifamily districts. Does anybody have a thought or an answer to that? I'm posing the question. Dan, you're kind of a quasi-constitutional lawyer. I mean, is their argument disingenuous? Which is what I guess I'm saying.
It's not disingenuous in the sense that if you're going to allow these without regulation in multifamily districts and you're declaring them non-transient, why wouldn't they be non-transient if they were in single family district too? They might have some equal protection arguments. They don't have a Fair Housing Act argument under this at all. And we've got to look, we can look just back at the Sailboat Bend versus Fort Lauderdale case and the more recent Costa Mesa case out of the 9th District, both of which have said quite clearly, if you've got a definition of family that sets a limit on the number of unrelated people that constitute a family, any group home, whether recovery residents or people with developmental disabilities, mental illness, if it fits within that definition, you got to treat it the same. You can't apply any extra zoning stuff to it. But if you're exceeding that cap of, say, 3 people, that's when the city's making a reasonable accommodation with the zoning ordinance. It's treating the people with disabilities more favorably than people without disabilities, which cannot be construed as discrimination. It's discrimination if you're treating people, a protected class, less favorably. I realize if I just realized there's a concern that the current administration in Washington would consider this to be a DEI situation. That was meant to be a little bit of a joke.
I guess we're through the looking glass. Is that what you're saying?
But
Okay. Well,
the bottom line, Al, is the court cases are really clear. That basic principle is we're allowing these uses when you wouldn't allow it for people without disabilities. So it's treated more favorably, and you're certainly allowed, as the court decisions have made clear, to put in some restrictions that, one, assure that benefit the people with disabilities, that assure that, one, you can require certification or licensing. It benefits the people with disabilities by protecting them. They're vulnerable people. You can have rationally based spacing, which helps assure that their core goals of normalization, community integration, including using non-disabled people as role models, can be achieved. And you can place a limit on the total number of people in the home so that you can be very confident it emulates a family, which is the whole underlying concept of these homes. And that's to be a permitted use. But you have to allow for further reasonable accommodation on a case-by-case review to locate within a spacing distance, because there's instances where you should be able to locate within a spacing distance, to have more than 10 or 12 people, whatever cap you use, to ensure financial and therapeutic viability, and to allow for homes for people with disabilities for which no licensing or certification is available. For example, people with eating disorders, a very threatening group of people. I hope I dripped with enough sarcasm there. So
Duly noted.
case law is on our side. It's very much on our side.
Let me ask you this about the Fair Housing Amendments Amendment Act. Is there anything in the actual legislation or anything that you have access to or you have seen or in your possession in legislative history that talks about the whole reason for this, for the Fair Housing Amendments Act, that that it's because you want to deinstitutionalize disabilities and put them in communities so that they can be a part of a community, or they can use the community as role models?
The legislation itself doesn't discuss that at all. The only legislative history is the House Judiciary Committee report, which I believe discusses it to some extent. I think they might, I don't remember the exact details. They do talk about prohibiting restrictive covenants and special use permits as the primary means of regulating these homes. But the case law has made it really clear that preventing concentrations is a goal in light of the Olmstead decision from the Supreme Court in about 1991, I think it was, that calls for deinstitutionalization of people with disabilities. So you've got that juxtaposition of Olmstead plus the Fair Housing Act. And we've got the data, we've put Government Accounting Office years ago did a study showing that group homes did tend to cluster, and operators really, a lot of the operators really didn't care because it was all about the money. And the subsequent court decisions, though, have very clearly made it the case law that the purpose given Olmstead and the purposes that states have, for example, in the family style case, Minnesota had required a spacing distance for licenses, is to assure that they will be able to function and achieve their end goals by not being clustered together.
Okay. I'm only asking that because the fight, the rhetoric, I'm gonna call it rhetoric because that's what it is that this is discrimination, and it is and that is based on studies that are outdated and no longer scientifically defensible.
Gee, that's Jeffrey Lynn speaking.
That's not, I'm talking about the people who are talking to the legislators.
I know he's fed that to them.
They're not him. I'm talking about others.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, he can be included, but I'm talking, if it was just Jeff, it would just be one person. But the entire premise behind this bill is getting their ear that this is discrimination, not in my backyard, and that's why it needs to be changed like this. I'm just devil's advocate.
Al, you've told me that they're also saying it's unconstitutional, and my response is, show us where it is written.
Yeah.
That
Okay,
is unconstitutional. The case law, the court decisions don't even get to the Constitution since the Fair Housing Act was passed in 88. They're decided under the Fair Housing Act. Before that, there was one case, Cleburne, in 1984, that got to the Constitution. And that had to do with the city prohibiting the group homes. The Jeffrey O case, Boca Raton, I understand, gets cited by the advocates for this bill, but it had absolutely nothing to do with spacing distances or requiring certification. The city allowed residential substance abuse treatment centers only in medical and motel districts. They didn't allow them in residential districts. So it clearly was discrimination there. But you've got to it's a combination. Everybody, you got to keep in mind there's two prongs to this Fair Housing Act business. One is prohibiting discrimination, and two, this doesn't exist for any other disability. Jurisdictions have to make a reasonable accommodation in their zoning practices to enable these group homes to exist for people with disabilities who need them to be able to live in the community. So the cities, if they simply allowed group homes that meet their definition of family with no additional zoning restrictions, they're in compliance with the Fair Housing Act. But because of the reasonable accommodation requirement, that's when you have to allow for homes that exceed that cap in the definition of family to locate. And you certainly can, as the courts have made very clear, including the most recent decisions by appellate courts, circuit courts, appellate courts, not district courts, including the 11th, where Florida is, that you can make reasonable, rationally based requirements that benefit the people with disabilities living in these homes. And that's what we're seeking to do with what we wanted to change to 419. This bill does not do that.
okay. Anybody have anything else you want to talk about B, and then we'll move on to C, and this meeting is going to be over pretty soon. Again, I wish that we had advocates. I mean, I'm trying to be as neutral as I possibly can, but full disclosure, I do think it's a public safety concern. I leave it up to the League of Cities and the Association of Counties to talk about what effect it'll have on neighborhoods. But my concern is the drug dealers are going to go where the people live, and there's less control over people living in clusters in individual houses that come and go. You're on your way to the store, nobody's going to have their eyes on you, and especially a level 4. And please, if anybody disagrees with me, feel free. Not going to hurt my feelings for sure. Okay.
I'm gonna jump in for a second and just say that, as a man in long-term recovery and working in this space in Chicago, as well as down here in South Florida, if I want to in 2025, if I want to get high, I'm not going to get it on the corner anymore. I'm gonna Uber Eats it and get it from a delivery dude or Uber Eats guy and have it delivered right to my house. So, that being said, in Chicago, we have several community-like sober living communities that have been around, unlicensed. There's no FAR accreditation there, no Illinois accreditation that's followed. People have unlicensed, unaccredited sober livings, and have done very well and kept them very safe for a number of years. I'm not advocating for those. I'd prefer that they were under the old DAS. I forget what it is now, Dan, the combination of mental health and addiction. But the people, I think the reason they want to have, whenever you've got the sober livings closer together, transition living closer together, obviously there's efficiencies if you have staff that are picking people up and dropping people off and everything that goes with it. So I'll shut up and we can move on to C. I just figured you wanted to hear a little bit from the other side.
Yeah, in your experience, Terry, and thank you for that. In your experience, were there any when you're talking about recovery residents that are not licensed or certified, I get it, because look at George Jan before there was certification. I mean, there are people certainly that do it right and don't need certification.
Correct.
That's not at issue anymore. And the bad actors were the ones who caused the whole system to implode, and you were there at the time. But my question is, we're dealing with something different. You know, we're dealing with, when we deal with clusters, were any of the, you mentioned Chicago, you mentioned here, have you ever seen the effects of a true cluster? And I get the efficiencies, especially on level 4, when you're in, there's 30 hours of treatment a week. But have you ever seen a cluster like the ones that could be rolling down on us in multifamily districts where you could have 10, 15 homes within 2-block area? Maybe 20, maybe 30.
No, no, I was just seeing large apartment buildings. I don't know, is Dan still on?
Yeah,
Dan, what do we call those big buildings that have the walkway down the middle and then there's 3 sides to them in Chicago?
Oh God, I lived in one of those.
Yeah,
Uh,
so did I. Grew up in one of those. But I've seen those turn into sober living, and that's multi-unit. Um, and they were great neighbors, but I guess, like we always say, it depends on the operator and the intention of the operator.
yeah, we did have the example that we have in the studies of those 4 buildings with a total of 96 people in them in Pompano Beach, I think it was, that I believe was denied certification by FAR many years ago, where they were flying people in for free and basically they weren't
There,
paying rent.
there you
well,
go.
the old watershed, is a perfect example. The old watershed had a barbed wire fence around the entire compound. And it was a depressing place. I did a ride along and talked to a bunch of people, none of whom, out of the 16 or so people that we talked to, were from Florida. And it was in the heyday in 2017. There was a guard at the gate, and the gate would slowly open and close like a geriatric.
Yeah, right.
Um, but that's not great, for either for somebody's, psyche, or, I don't want to advocate something like that for recovery, but they certainly were guarded. And the thing that frightens me is the level 4, where there's so many triggers, and that I don't even think there is a sweet spot. I think there is just an accommodation one way or another. And we don't know what B is going to do. We don't know what having that many duplexes and triplexes. If you have a condominium or an apartment complex, it's a different animal, and it's also, within a municipality or a county, they're zoned for what they are. They're not, certainly not zoned for families. But anyway, thank you, Terry. I lay awake at night thinking about, I don't want to get this wrong, because I don't, I agree that you can't, we need to have services for people, and we need to do the best we can on each journey to sobriety for people who are in treatment. But I'm just seeing so many things that can go sideways. But the Uber Eats thing, not going to work in a FAR certified home, because their argument is it's FAR certified, so we won't let anybody get drugs. There are some places that search people when they come back from when they're out, but most of them do not. And it's not a FAR requirement to search people. We had an overdose, I think. I don't know, Michael, or Susan, you might recall that this is anecdotal, but somebody came in and was not searched, and they went in their room and they had drugs. And I think 3 people in the house shared the drugs or something like that. And you can't prevent stuff like that from happening. You can have eyes on the inside and be an environment on the inside. But if somebody can't get it delivered, they will go out to the street corner if they know they're there, or somebody be passing by, they just walk outside the house and people are flagging them down. It's not a matter of how people are used to getting their drugs. It's a matter of having them, you know, the triggers in front of their face when they go walk to the store. So I guess that's what worries me. Okay, Dan, you
Fair
have,
enough.
Yeah, Terry, those are courtyard buildings.
Courtyard buildings, yeah.
I want to just quickly quote something from the appellate court in family style out of St. Paul, Minnesota. There was an operator that had about 119 people with mental illness and 20 group homes in a 1.5 block area. They were largely three flats, and he wanted to add more homes and more people. And the court said further growth of the family style treatment, that concentration may very well be counterproductive to the desegregation of the mentally ill. Had the state or city intended to discriminate against the mentally ill, one sure way would be to situate all group homes in the same neighborhood, a situation in which the family style operators argue the state's group home dispersal requirements are designed to ensure that mentally handicapped persons needing residential treatment will not be forced into enclaves of treatment facilities that would replicate and thus perpetuate the isolation resulting from institutionalization. They conclude the goal of the institutionalization remains a valid and legitimate end that the state of Minnesota and the city of St. Paul are pursuing through legally acceptable means. So while that case involves a 1,300-foot spacing distance, which the court did not, the actual distance wasn't challenged, just the existence of any spacing was challenged. I think the decision makes it extremely clear that the discrimination would be if you recreate the institutional atmosphere by placing these in a neighborhood or on clustered them on a block.
okay, thanks, Dan. Anybody else want to comment about B? Thank you. Let's move down to C. A municipality or a county may deny the establishment of a level 4 certified recovery residence. Okay, so C is what deals with level 4, which is why I say B does not. Okay, or if B does, it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then for level 4s, a municipality or a county may have some ability to refuse them, to open up. Okay. May deny level 4 if the proposed use is adjacent to or on 2 or more sides of a parcel zoned for single-family residential use and is within a single-family residential development with at least 25 contiguous single-family homes. For the purposes of this paragraph, the term adjacent to means those properties sharing more than one point of a property line, but the term does not include properties separated by a public road. So if you're across the street, you can't deny. Anybody want to comment? Okay, Terrell, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think the language was taken from the Live Local 3.0 bill, which there's several variations out there right now, which has to do with affordable housing. And one of the things they talked about is providing for affordable housing and multifamily structures, except for, and it had this 25 home thing, 25 single family homes. It's somewhat arbitrary, but what I really wanted to bring up here is that, so where I live, for example, I live in a community that has more than 25 single family homes. And, but at the entrance to it, there are, I don't know, a grouping of duplexes, maybe let's say 5 or 6, just for purposes of the example. The way this reads, the first 5 or so of those homes could be used for recovery residents, but the 6th one couldn't because that one is actually touching and directly adjacent to the 25 single family homes. So again, it just seems kind of arbitrary. I don't know how this would be applied realistically. And who's measuring it and who's making that determination. I don't know why they did this.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is an example of what's so arbitrary and capricious about this, which could get it thrown out in court. It's as arbitrary and capricious as the current state zoning restrictions that don't allow, for example, community residences within 500 feet of a single family neighborhood. There is just no justification for it. And what really makes it confusing why it's here is I don't know how cities and operators are going to conceivably be able to implement this except with great expense. Because they're going to have to go out and find sites that, I mean, it's quite a unfunded mandate on the cities to have to try to implement this, which is not going to be easy to implement. And I don't think it's going to help the operators much either. But the bottom line is just purely arbitrary and capricious. And it doesn't matter if it's the state or local government, zoning cannot be arbitrary and capricious.
Well, do
As
you,
that-
what-
And if I may add one thing,
sure.
so everyone understands the legal structure, the power to zone resides with the state. In every state, it resides with the state. The state allows municipalities and counties to do zoning. Although in Florida, it's, from what I understand from Nancy Stroud, it's a little bit different arrangement, but the original power to zone resides with the state of Florida, which is why it can do statewide zoning.
Okay, Dan, Terrell, can you, or Dan, explain why this section is there to begin with? I mean, is it just to make it more palatable, I guess, for level 4? That there is some power to deny if it's too close to a residential area? I mean, do you think that's
Well,
what's
it's
in
too
there?
close to, it's too close to a single family residential
Oh,
area.
yeah,
Let's
I'm
not
sorry,
forget
single family.
multifamily is residential housing,
Yeah.
as are recovery residences and other community residences. I think it's there. I think you're right. It's there to try to make it seem palatable. And I think the people behind the bill are targeting multifamily districts areas because they perceive them as having less political power, which I think is very true all throughout the nation. So they think it's easy, much easier pickings, and I think it may also result. This is a sociologist in me, in possibly concentrating a lot of these homes in minority neighborhoods. Will be easier pickings and more likely to have multifamily housing and less political power.
Right. Anyone else want to chime in? The last part of the bill is the CRRA amendment. And with a ratio of 1 to 8 in personnel to patient. And a ratio personnel to resident of 1 to 6. It's been amended. It's now actively managed up to 300 residents. So it increases the 150 to 3. And then it crosses out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and puts in during times when residents are at the residence, which I don't think anybody really had a problem with that. We discussed amending that in our bill, which died a horrible death because of political infighting. But so anybody want to chime in on having a certified recovery residence administrator administering 300 up to 300 residents with those ratios? Yeah,
I don't necessarily want to chime in on that, but you did skip over the language in D that provides that the subsection applies to certified recovery residence providers that were voluntarily certified on or before July 1st of 2025.
right.
So my concern is that the bill is retroactive. That,
Yeah, it is retroactive. Sure.
and so that was in D of the earlier section 2.
Oh, I thought it was,
Or section 1, I'm sorry.
yeah, I thought it was in D. Subsection D applies. This subsection applies to certified recovery residents providers that were voluntarily certified by the credentialing entity on or before July 1st, 2025. So it absolutely is only for those recovery residences that already have a program.
But it's not only for, that's the thing. If it was intended to be only for, I think it would say only that this subsection applies only to certified recovery residence providers that were voluntarily certified, on or before July 1st. Instead, it says this applies to certified recovery residence providers that were certified on or before July 1st. So in my mind, that covers everyone certified before and after. So it's essentially retroactive.
Huh.
And in that regard, in a lot of ways, you could read it as repealing prior existing ordinances. You could read it as applying to people that, maybe it's intended only, but that's not what it says. So it could be going backwards and forwards. And then if it is intended only to be before then, does that then mean that only those that were already certified could then kind of expand in, a way consistent with this new statute, and nobody else can if they're certified after? It's very unclear, and very concerning, because the way I read it is it repeals ordinances, or it could repeal ordinances or be interpreted to repeal ordinances that were put in place before this statute passed.
Terrell, that's a great point. And the way I read it is this. Because it says certified recovery residence providers and not residences, I agree with you that it's the providers themselves. So if a provider is certified prior to July, one residence, say, provider has one level 2, okay, residence with 12 people in it. That would mean that provider, for time continuum forever and a day, can open up more recovery residences under that provider certification. Okay, but and the interesting point you bring up is you're going to have a hybrid ordinance. You're going to have an ordinance that applies to anybody who's not in this class. So your ordinance is not repealed. It's just inapplicable to anybody who was a provider, certified provider, before July 1st, 2025. And so any home that provider would open up would be exempt from any of your ordinances or any requirements of the municipality. Dan, do you read it that way? And I'll ask Susan next.
Yeah, but I it just hit me that this might be designed to force some new operators to sell their operations to a previously certified provider to further increase the number of homes that this provider is operating. That might be the underlying reason why this is included. I don't know. It's speculation, but
I
sounds in
think
character.
I think I know the reason why this is in there. And based on discussions with some of the people who are backing this or want to see this bill into law, it was put in here to say, hey, we're not breaking the bank on everything. We just want our level 4. Okay, I'll just say it's a level 4 provider, and we just want it to apply to us. We don't care. We're trying to make it more palatable so it will pass by saying, okay, there's a sunset and grandfather here. And because in recent discussions, it was like, okay, well, we'll take that out. If you're going to tag us with being, okay, this is a bill only for you so that you can build your empire, and you meaning multiple people who already have their certification, then we'll just take it out. And that would be a bigger world of hurt than leaving it in. So, I mean, from my perspective is, well, no, leave it in, and I'll stop making the argument that this is the an enrichment grabbed by several. I think there may be five. I don't know, Michael, Susan. There are how many actual level 4 providers are there in the state? I know that they were saying there were 82. I thought facilities or licensed locations, but I thought there were less than 10 providers.
I'm deferring to Mr. Schlossman, but I don't see him up here. I
I
don't
have-
know the number.
Al, I have to double check that figure because I thought it was 82 providers, but I'll double
Yeah.
check.
Yeah, I thought it was 82 residences because they were trying to downplay. Well, it's only 82 places in the state. And they got that number 82 from the municipalities.
But Al, it's not just for level 4 because it's talking about the whole subsection. It's not just talking about the subsection directly above it. It's talking about the entire subsection 397.487.15.
100%. I'm just talking, the question came up as to why that section's in there. And the proponents of the bill are not level 1 providers. Let me put it to you that way.
Got it. Thank you.
So anyway, okay, well, there are several things in this bill that I will say in good faith, or were meant in good faith, to limit the applicability of the bill. So, in that regard, this is not the design of some rogue who just wants to break things for the sake of breaking things. This is something that is a business model that several people, not just the particular proponents of this bill, but over the last year or two, several people who, by the way, are not very happy with your study, Dan, because their economic business model they're saying is not profitable under the study. The level 4s are where the rubber meets the road here in terms of profitability, because they have keeping an eye on everybody. And Terry, you brought this up, and it's a very valid point that this particular model, this level 4 model, is a quasi-institutional model. It used to be inpatient treatment. And then somehow or other, Florida mucked it all up and created the Florida model. Many of these folks, and Terry, tell me if you disagree, but many of people who are in 30-hour intensive outpatient treatment really ought to be in a 30, 60-day inpatient program. We don't have that in Florida anymore. The payers won't pay for it.
I mean, we should all be utilizing the addiction medicine crosswalk for determining level of care for people, and that's how you decide if that kind of person that should be in residential is in residential, right?
Yeah, but I'm told by billing people and whatnot that residential detox is happening, but residential, unless you have a gold plan or your private pay, residential generally doesn't happen anymore. It's these intensive outpatient programs.
That's correct, because what happens is insurance company gets called, and they're the ones that have the absolute best record of the patient. The patient's been using their insurance company 1 to 3 times. Aetna has in their record the notes from each treatment episode where they've been. And when you call in to get a 4th treatment episode, they're going to say, wait a minute, this guy was just here. We're not paying for that again. We'll pay for outpatient. That's all we're going to authorize.
Okay, but you're saying that the first or second time, generally they're doing full inpatient now?
It depends on the patient and the critical necessity of their care and medical necessity criteria.
Because I thought that
According
was, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, it depends on, the insurance company, the medical necessity criteria that they utilize to make that decision.
Yeah, and you know what? It's probably a hybrid here somewhere, but it's always been, talking to people, it's always been the argument that that Florida developed the Florida model. And it's an insurance, I'm not going to say grab, what makes it so bad, for lack of a better word, is you're taking somebody who back in the day would have been an inpatient treatment, but of course back in the day, you weren't covered for a relapse. You weren't covered for pre-existing condition. But what's happening is the insurance company is making the decision as to what level of care you're going into, and Florida has given them this Florida model.
Yeah, the providers are responding to what they're being pressured to respond to for economic reasons to develop a different model that's going to work.
And the insurance companies are making out like bandits because they don't even have to pay for housing. Don't get me started, Terry.
Yeah, no, and I'm not patting ourselves in the back in Chicago, but the guys in Chicago, the really good operators, none of them have any deals with any treatment center at all. They run their sober livings, and if they have patients in their facility from all different treatment centers, and the people find their way to their place they're supposed to be. There's no transportation provided by the treatment center or the sober living to get there. You use good old Chicago Transit Authority to get there, or you have your own car. And it's just worked in most cases. But what happened down here was just a volume thing. So much competition, people looking for ways to be creative, to stay alive.
Okay. Thanks,
I
Terry.
shouldn't say stay alive. There's a lot of them. I mean, we all know the story, but if you watch that movie that you and Dave and I were talking about, the documentary that just won at the South by Southwest Film Festival called Shuffle, I mean, it gives you probably the best breakdown that I've seen.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Terry. Dan, you got another comment?
Yeah, I just realized the zoning approach recommended in the state study and that I've been writing with the cities doesn't prevent the advocates of this bill's model. The only
Because you're recovery communities?
because they're recovery communities which can occupy multiple buildings under the same ownership or related ownership. The only difference is there's two differences. One, you can't take over a whole neighborhood with this because there is the spacing distance based on the size of the recovery community. But you still could have multiple buildings in a single recovery community on a block. You couldn't spread them out among multiple blocks, but you could do it on a block. And secondly, what they're doing, trying to get rid of the distinction between family and transitional community residences so that even the very short term, high turnover certified recovery communities would be allowed in multifamily buildings in single family districts as of right, as opposed to having to go through a zoning procedure to show that they're compatible with the neighborhood. Those are the two distinctions, but they could do their model. They just can't take over whole neighborhoods without as of right. They'd have to get zoning approval. And I don't think very many cities would allow a whole neighborhood to be turned over into recovery residences, which would do what the family style case pointed out, be a disservice and harm to the people with disabilities.
Okay. Michael Schlossman?
Yeah, just getting back to you, it's 100 level 4 providers across the state with 267 different locations.
How many?
267.
Yeah, but how many providers?
100.
100. Okay. Huh. Are there different models for level 4, or would all 100 benefit from this legislation?
That I don't know. You had mentioned there was a number 82 floating around.
Yeah, there was.
I'm not sure where those 18 go to.
Yeah, I was told that the municipalities gave a number at 82. Maybe that's because the counties, some are unincorporated in counties. I don't know.
It's possible.
That may be. Okay, well, hey, let's get out of this because I'm curious to see how many people are still hanging in there. Okay, we got 16. Does anybody have anything for the good and welfare? I mean, I don't know. We'll know later today whether this bill is going to be accepted into the Rules Committee next week. That would be the next stop. I'm presuming that it passed today out of the HHS committee. Oh, and Dan, I see you have your hand up, so in a minute I'll let you close this out. Yeah. Anybody, if you have any ideas or any comments that you didn't want to make at the meeting and you want to contact me, just please feel free. And I see that we have a new raised hand from Houston Park. Houston, always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Great to see you guys. I just wanted to give you a quick update on how important this task force is and what it has done since the beginning. But the concept of CORE, the Comprehensive Opioid Network, that's was initially the pilot that we did in West Palm or Palm Beach, is now replicated in 47 of the 67 counties, with the goal of ultimately, probably in the next year, of reaching all 67 counties where there's a system of pre-hospital care with MAT assistance, hospital involvement, and then handoffs to long-term providers. So our efforts are working, and there's no other state that has a comprehensive network like what has been established from our hard work.
You know, Houston, we have a meeting May 14th, I believe, and I'd like you and maybe Dr. Shepke to give us an update because we haven't had an update on this. Must be 8 months, probably 8-10 months. So that would be great. And I do want to ask this one question because I know that this was a bone of contention. We were the first. Do we still have a core program? Because remember, the hospital kind of backed up.
So that's a good question. And so the answer to that is yes. In Palm Beach County, there are funds allocated to a couple of the fire rescue agencies through the opioid settlement. And that settlement covers MAT services for the pre-hospital provider, continuation of care, which we have a great relationship still with JFK North. We met yesterday with building up with JFK Main and also Palms West. They also have freestanding ERs, which we're looking at incorporating. And then HCA purchased MD Now clinics. And so there's some contractual agreements being made right now to use some of those clinics to divert the unnecessary ER response. So there is a development happening. The city of West Palm Beach is getting ready to roll out their program. Palm Beach County is working on getting theirs re-implemented. And with that, many of the other cities and towns will follow.
Okay, well, thank you, Houston. I'm looking forward to the update. I really am. I mean, it's so good to see an idea take shape. And Houston, you were when this started, you remember your first pre-core program that was just a pilot, and you were working for the fire department for Palm Beach County Fire Rescue. And you were one of the original members of the task force. So thanks for hanging with us for so many years.
I actually got in trouble for bringing negative attention to Palm Beach County, but it was corrected. So,
hey, there no longer are there advisories from the Attorney General in, I think it was Massachusetts, to be to not travel for drug treatment to Florida. There actually was a physical travel advisory in Massachusetts by the Attorney General. This is like 2017.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that.
I mean, we've come a long way, and I hope that no matter what happens with this bill, it doesn't set us back. Time will tell. We don't even know whether the bill's going to pass. But anyway, John, you had your hand up, and then again, I promised we'd end with Dan.
Yeah, and thanks. Hey, Houston, just real
Yeah,
quick.
John, turn up your volume, man. We can't hear you.
Jeez. Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
He's so soft
There
spoken
you
is the
go.
problem.
Yeah, bullshit. Hey, Houston, if you can hear me, just real quick, we get queries on this apparently a $900,000 appropriation out of opioid settlement into Palm Beach County. Is that what you're referring to when you just outlined, some of the initiatives? Because we haven't been able to get a clear answer on what that appropriation was, where it emanated from, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have some information on that?
Yeah, so the allocated funds are coming as a result of the opioid settlement and the abatement settlement. And those funds were made available to the counties who then share the funds to the cities and towns if they applied for it. But it is more than $900,000. It's I believe it's $4 million with an 18-year sustainment. So the
Yeah,
source
yeah.
came from the CDC through the settlement, through Florida's DCF, and then allocated out to the managing entities for the qualified counties. And the non-qualified counties, the managing entities are going to run, and the qualified counties, they have a choice of pairing up with the managing entity or running it themselves.
Yeah, I'll follow up with you offline. I'm certainly familiar with that side of the settlement equation, but there's this dangling kind of $900,000 we've been queried at advisory committee level that.
Okay, that may be the initial funds that are being utilized to start up a pre-hospital MAT program with
Yeah.
EMS providers.
Yeah, I just want to know where they're emanating from and to who is the recipient. But I'll
Okay.
follow up with you. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, Dan, I promised I'd give you the last word, so you're up, sir.
Okay, two quick things. One, whenever anyone brings up, gee, this is based on old studies, ask them for new studies. And they won't be able to come up with them because they don't exist. These matters have been so well settled, nobody's funding new studies on these matters. Kind of like the cigarette smoking cause cancer. No one's funding studies on that anymore either. Second, and I'll close with this, anybody who might be interested in contributing a quote or two for a press release about what's wrong with these bills, and perhaps if you're willing to be interviewed by the local media, please send an email to me as soon as you can with your contact information at dan@grouphomes.law. I've put it in the chat, so you got the email, but I realize at some point very soon we got to go to the media and alert the citizens of Florida as to these bills, because we've got to reach the legislators who are outside of Southeast Florida, who don't seem to quite understand the perhaps unintended or intended consequences of these bills as to what's going on. And people need to be aware about these. So please send me an email to dan@grouphomes.law if you're interested in contributing some quotes or being interviewed by the media.
Well, Dan, anybody wants to contact me, I'll be interviewed for sure. So if you have somebody from the media who wants the location, the original location of the sponsors for this bill or these bills is the House version is Sarasota. It's West Coast of Florida, Sarasota, Hillsborough, Tampa area. So that's it's interesting. They have a very
Scientology.
significant. What's that?
Scientology.
Scientology.
And that's headquarters over there.
Well, okay. That's kind
Could
of
be them.
that's
Could
kind
be
of like a
their
non sequitur, but I see where you're going with that. Okay, I didn't see it coming, but
their famous Narconon program that they have.
well, the upshot is, they have a serious problem out there that they haven't addressed as coherently as we have in Palm Beach County, and so with high overdose death rates higher than ours, they may just want to tell everybody, hey, we're doing something, but this is not the right thing, I don't think. There are other things we can do. And Dan, I'm happy that you brought up the recovery residence communities. Because I had brought that up before the bill was ever launched, when I had discussions with some of the level 4 folks. And I said, well, you got your recovery residence your recovery communities where you can have multiple structures. And I don't know why that was just brushed off. To this day, I don't know why that was brushed off.
I think they don't want to have any concern over spacing distances, and I'd be particularly concerned if someone wanted to establish a recovery committee right next door to a community residence. That would be of some concern, especially if it's a recovery residence. That would certainly change the atmosphere of the neighborhood for the people in that recovery residence. So I think they don't want, I think they just want to be able to locate wherever they want to.
Yeah, don't overthink it, right? Okay. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We're back for a regular meeting on the 14th of May.